So thank you so much for joining us this morning and taking time out of your schedules for this session of Employment First Topics and Tactics. That's our monthly series to equip job seekers, employment professionals, parents, and partners with tools and strategies to advance employment first principles in Arizona. I want to let you all know that live captioning is available. To access live captions, click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. I'm not sure if we have interpretation today. I'm not sure if anyone requested that. But if you encounter any accessibility issues at any point, please reach out to us and reach out to me or where it says Sonoran Center host. And I want to remind everyone when you speak to try not to speak too quickly so that our captioner is able to keep up with us. I want to offer a land acknowledgement. We do respectfully acknowledge that the University of Arizona sits on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. We are grateful to be on this land, and we pay our respects to the elders, past and present. We also want to acknowledge Arizona Vocational Rehabilitation. This monthly series is funded by Arizona VR, and our initiative promotes competitive integrated employment for all Arizonans with disabilities. We do this session every month. Next month, we're going to be 1 week behind because of, I believe, Columbus Day. So hopefully the link is going to pop up in your chat. Please register for all our sessions. We have some good stuff planned. But now I'm going to get to our session today. We have an amazing guest today, one of my very favorite people to work with and collaborate with, and just in general. Jon Meyers is the Executive Director of the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. He's been around for quite a while now. We've worked together for a long time. He's a great champion of Employment First and of all initiatives that lead to empowerment, equity, and people achieving their dreams. Jon's going to chat today about the disability employment landscape in Arizona and how we can understand how it all works and what some strategies are for us to work together to make the change we want to see. So I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Jon. But thank you all for being here and enjoy. Take it away, Jon.
All right. Thank you very much, Gina. And thank you to all of you for giving me the opportunity to be with you today. I'm going to start sharing my screen, hoping you can all see that. If you can't, please let me know. But I think it's there. And Gina, are we good? Good to go?
Yes, it is. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's a privilege to be with you this morning and to have this opportunity to talk about the employment landscape and maybe put a little particular emphasis on the policy side of disability employment. If you're not familiar with the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council, we are an organization that is charged with doing systems change advocacy on behalf of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The DD Council is one of 56 similar councils in every U.S. state and territory, and we are federally funded, which means we are not lobbyists. We are systems change advocates. We do a lot of education for our policymakers, whether elected officials or appointed officials. We do a lot of work around particular issues such as employment, but also things like housing and transportation and healthcare and self-determination, self-advocacy, things like that. And we operate under, as I said, federal statute under the DD Act. We were established along with the protection and advocacy agencies, in our case, Disability Rights Arizona, and the University Centers for Excellence in Disabilities and Developmental Disabilities, the Sonoran Center, and the Institute for Human Development up at NAU. So we are part of what we call the DD network. And as I said, much of the work we do is around advocacy, around education, around building systems change so that individuals with disabilities have the greatest opportunity in our communities around the state and around the country and so that they receive and they experience the highest degree of equity for themselves and for their caregivers wherever they may live. To give a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today, first of all, what's the point of disability employment? Why are we even talking about it? Why does it matter? I have a feeling that many of you already have thoughts on that. Many of you are already committed, perhaps all of you are already committed to this notion that individuals with disabilities deserve the opportunity to be employed if they so choose. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we need to promote that understanding and that perspective to communities around the state. And also a little bit about the systems that serve people with disabilities around Arizona, where there are some shortcomings, where there are some things that we need to address, where there's some things where we can be part of making improvements in the system. And then finally, what we can do to help bring about that change that we all seek and that individuals with disabilities deserve. So to that question, why does disability employment matter? Oh, and by the way, I should say, if you have questions while I'm speaking, you can feel free to raise your hand. I guess I would ask Gina or Jason perhaps to kind of watch the chat, watch for raised hands. I can't really see it, but if you have questions, feel free to ask as we go along, or feel free to hold your questions till the end and we'll address them when I'm done. I talk a lot, but I'm hopeful I won't take the entire hour, and we will have time to talk about some of your questions at the end if you so choose. But don't be shy about raising a hand if you have questions as we go along. So again, why does disability employment matter? Well, it matters for a whole variety of reasons, and it matters to a whole variety of different audiences. For the individual with the disability, I think it's pretty obvious. There are benefits that go along with being employed. There are certainly financial benefits, the opportunity to earn a paycheck. There are also personal benefits. There is the dignity that goes along with holding a job, with contributing to society, with being a part of the community in which you live, and feeling that you are making a difference, that you are adding something to the social fabric around you. For the employer, there are additional benefits, many of which some employers don't even know about. First of all, they can find thousands upon thousands of qualified employees among the pool of individuals with disabilities. Often it's taken for granted that people with disabilities don't have skills, don't have the motivation to work, don't have a desire to work. That is incorrect. Not every person with a disability wishes to work. Not every person with a disability understands what it takes to find work. But that's where we have an opportunity to make a difference. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But for those who do wish to work, they are qualified, they can be trained, they can receive the kind of education they need to hold a whole variety of jobs. And employers too often don't understand that or don't recognize it, even if the evidence is placed in front of them. There is also the fact that as research has shown over the course of many years, individuals with disabilities, once they are employed, are among the most dedicated and most loyal employees of businesses of whatever type. The turnover among disabled employees is far lower than the turnover among employees who do not have disabilities. So employers can find a very dedicated, very stable pool of potential employees among those with disabilities. And then finally, they can increase the diversity of their workforces by looking to the disability community for employees. Now, I don't want to get too political, but we all understand that there are certain terms that are kind of out of vogue these days, and diversity is one of them. But the reality is, and we believe that most employers recognize it, the greater the diversity within a workforce, the stronger the workforce, the more responsive the workforce, the better the workforce is able to understand the communities the business serves, and the better able it is to respond to the needs of those communities. So diversity benefits all, and diversity that includes individuals with disabilities has an even greater impact, has even greater value. In terms of our communities as a whole, the ability and the willingness to employ individuals with disabilities, it promotes social justice, it promotes equity, it promotes the opportunity for all citizens to be engaged in their communities, and it makes for a stronger community. It allows us to understand one another better. It allows us to involve ourselves and engage ourselves with one another better, and it makes for stronger communities. Rather than being divisive, we should seek to be inclusive. And then economically, hiring individuals with disabilities has tremendous positive impacts for the economy. First of all, it offers individuals the opportunity to earn money which they can then spend on goods and services around the community. It also can reduce the reliance on public benefits. So people who are employed, people with disabilities who are employed, may rely less on some of the services and supports they receive, whether through DDD or access or other forms of assistance. It is a way to generate greater tax revenues and a way to generate greater spending and less reliance upon those public benefits. So there are all kinds of benefits, all kinds of positive attributes to employment of individuals with disabilities that are often disregarded or ignored when we talk about people with disabilities having jobs. There are a lot of different systems that support individuals with disabilities to get jobs, and I will say from the outset that I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but one of the greatest challenges we have is that with so many systems engaged in this work, too often they don't communicate with one another, too often they don't interact and collaborate with one another, and we still face challenges in getting our systems to cooperate. And that is one of the things where we collectively can make a difference. Starting with vocational rehabilitation, there are multiple forms in the state. There is the Rehabilitation Services Administration through the Department of Economic Security that runs voc rehab throughout the state of Arizona. But there is both the state of Arizona VR, and then there are in many cases tribal VR entities. Not in the case of all tribes around the state, but in the case of many of them, and certainly the larger ones have their own tribal VR programs serving the individuals on their tribal lands. Then there's the Division of Developmental Disabilities. Now, we all think of DDD as an entity that provides services and supports to people with disabilities. It's often not understood that DDD, among the supports that DDD provides, is employment-related assistance, again, at both the tribal and the state level. So DDD can be looked to as a means of assistance when individuals with disabilities are seeking employment. And in an ideal world, DDD and VR, both of them part of the Department of Economic Security, in an ideal world, they are working together. There should be a seamlessness in the way they support individuals with disabilities who are seeking to become employed. Then there is ACCESS, the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, our state's Medicaid agency. And by the way, I'm going to go off on a tangent for just a moment. A great many people, and we've learned this over the last few months as there's been a fight at the federal level around Medicaid funding. A great many people in Arizona do not understand that ACCESS is our Medicaid agency. And so all of the employment-related supports and services that are funded through the Medicaid system come through ACCESS. ACCESS not only provides healthcare, it provides a wide range of home and community-based services to individuals with disabilities. It is another partner in this fabric around employment. And there are our education partners. There are school districts, local education agencies, the Department of Education, the State Board of Education, all of whom play some role in making sure that individuals with disabilities can receive the transition supports they need in order to prepare for employment after the K-12 system, but also the education opportunities they may need, the post-K-12 education opportunities, post-secondary education they may need. It could be university level, could be community college level, it could be career and technical education. There are, again, a wide variety of different ways that individuals can receive the education and training they need, along with the transition supports to prepare them for post-educational employment. There are also benefits planners, people whose specialty is to help people with disabilities understand how employment can affect their benefits, or how their benefits can correlate with employment. Again, one of the great misunderstandings among many people is that if you are receiving services and supports through DDD, through Arizona Long-Term Care System, you can't work. You'll lose your benefits. Well, that's not necessarily true. Obviously, there are asset limits that have to be maintained or adhered to in order for people to qualify for those public benefits, but those do not necessarily discount people from having the opportunity to be employed. And one of our staff members, Jason Sneed, does a lot of work around this area, as does Mike Leva, again from our staff, in educating folks about how they can maintain employment and continue to receive essential benefits. And then finally, there are service providers around the state who have employment programs, who support employment programs, who help individuals become employed and maintain their employment in a vast array of different areas and different fields. So this is not a small network. This is a large network around the state that includes both governmental and non-governmental entities. Again, in an ideal world, all of them working toward the same goal, all of them interrelating, and all of them collaborating for the benefit of the individual seeking employment. And lest we forget, there are the job seekers themselves and the businesses that will employ them. There is a lot of work to do still to help job seekers with disabilities understand what their rights are, what their opportunities are, how they can receive the training and the education they need to become qualified to hold certain jobs. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of work to do to train employees, to educate employers about the benefits and the advantages of hiring people with disabilities. So we definitely have our work cut out for us, but that's why we're all in this field, right? We're in this because we want to accomplish something and we want to do it for the benefit of the disability community. When it comes to disability policy, we have a long history in this country, well, a relatively long history in this country, of policies intended to improve opportunity and improve equity for people with disabilities. Now, granted, most of the work that's been done has occurred over the last 60 or so years, but the origination, the genesis of disability employment policy really began with the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, of 1938. Now, this is a very controversial law. It was put into place during the Great Depression. It was put into place in order to provide protections for workers and to provide a floor from which workers could build and could create careers, could create opportunity for themselves. It is a little bit controversial these days because part of the FLSA was the 14C program, was the sub-minimum wage program that continues to this day. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But at least we know that from the FLSA grew a great many new opportunities that didn't exist before for all workers, including workers with disabilities. In the early 1970s, the Rehabilitation Act, which was passed through Congress and signed by President Nixon, brought about a whole array of new opportunities for individuals with disabilities to have employment-related training opportunities, to have education opportunities, and to have certain protections under the law that would prevent them from being discriminated against. It hasn't proven to be perfect, but it has made vast improvements, especially within the education system and Section 504 and the supports that are provided in education for individuals under the Section 504 provisions. The Education for All Handicapped Children Act, which was passed in 1975, later transitioned to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act in 1990. IDEA is something we all know and love, right? Well, maybe we don't all love it, but it is another step forward in trying to improve educational opportunities for students with disabilities, to ensure that there is equity within the education environment and that individuals with disabilities are receiving the kind of training and the kind of education they need to be to be members of their communities after they leave the K-12 education system. Of course, the Americans with Disabilities Act was the great leap forward for American society when it came to disabilities. That is now 35 years old, and again, no law is perfect. ADA is not perfect. It has not been perfectly implemented in our country, but it has made such a world of difference for individuals with disabilities, especially in terms of access to public resources and access to public accommodations. So the ADA was a watershed moment for the disability community. We are still trying to perfect it, just as we're still trying to perfect our nation as a whole, but we are a work in progress, and certainly a lot of progress has been made since 1990 in the passage of the ADA. The Ticket to Work and Work Incentives Improvement Act from 1999, many people are just not even familiar with the Ticket to Work program and how it can offer people the opportunity to work and still receive public benefits. Again, I don't want to go to a lot of detail because I'm actually not as much of an expert on this as I would like to be, but Jason, Mike, from our staff, if you need more information, they are experts on this and they can provide you a lot more information. But these, again, are opportunities for people to maintain the public benefits that ensure they have adequate health care and they have adequate services, but also be contributing members of society through employment opportunities. And then finally, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act from 2014. WIOA was another great step forward. Again, not perfectly implemented. Still, we're still in the process of trying to sort through how WIOA affects people with disabilities and how it can be perfectly implemented or more perfectly implemented in our states. But it is another sign that as society, we do take seriously that individuals with disabilities should have the opportunity to be employed and should receive the training they need. It's just now a matter of how to make that, how to make the implementation more effective and more efficient to serve the disability community. So this is not even an entire list of all the different things that affect the disability community. There's sort of the highlights when it comes to employment-related public policy over the last, 70, 80 years, but most importantly, over the last 50 years or so. There is much, much more that has been done and much more that will be done in coming years, we trust, in order to improve opportunities for the disability community. Now, I mentioned that, nothing is perfect, and certainly even with all of those pieces of policy, all of those pieces of legislation that have been put into place, we continue to have difficulties. We continue to face some challenges. And there are areas where the programs, even with the best of intentions, are not meeting all the needs of people with disabilities. As I've mentioned a couple of times now, our systems do not necessarily work well together. I believe they all want to. I think as individuals, we all believe that we want to collaborate. We want to be engaged with each other. We want to produce the greatest, most positive effect for people with disabilities who are seeking employment. But there are any number of reasons why, for bureaucratic reasons, for practical reasons, from a purely, from a standpoint purely of understanding how the systems work, we may not be able to make that happen individually, and our systems have not yet figured out how to make that happen universally. So the fact that our agencies, public or private, do not necessarily communicate well with one another, do not have fully integrated programs with one another, it leads to some challenges for people with disabilities. And there are gaps that we need to fill, gaps that we need to understand and then figure out a way to address. The transition issue is still one that is challenging for a lot of caregivers as well as students with disabilities. There's no question that our current state law, current law which requires transition planning to begin at age 16 is short-sighted, it's inadequate. Transition planning needs to begin at a much earlier age. And we at the council, along with many of you, have been at the forefront of pushing for the Arizona Board of Education to lower that age so that students can begin at the age of 14 at the very latest, ideally even at the age of 12, because we understand how much work is involved in preparing students with disabilities to transition out of education, to transition into their communities. We also believe that it's a service not only to the students, but to the educators who serve them. It gives them more time to help students put together an appropriate transition plan, to put together goals, to put together the various resources they need to become employable. So we've been working with the State Board of Education. We are strongly advocating for this, for transition to start at an earlier age, and new rules have been adopted by the State Board of Education related to this. So we're seeing that age come down, and now it's a matter of developing the policies that will guide the implementation of this lower transition age and help students prepare to move out of the system more prepared for what is going to await them. As I mentioned earlier, also, we do not have strong and universal understanding throughout the business community, the employer community around the state, around the benefits of hiring people with disabilities, some of the challenges that might be involved in that, but also some of the solutions to those challenges, and some of the results they can hope to realize as a result of disability hiring. So we need to develop more of a network of employers, and this is going to involve working not just with individual businesses, but working with broader coalitions of employers, and working from the disability provider and advocate side as well as the business side. And this is an area where every party needs to be involved. There is, as mentioned earlier, also a fact that some individuals believe they will lose their benefits if they take on employment. That is not true, or that is not necessarily true. There obviously are some limits. There are some parameters in which things need to be addressed or need to be implemented. But working together with them, working with experts who understand the impact of employment on benefits and the individual seeking employment, there are ways to guide them through the process so that they can achieve the goals they've set for themselves and continue to receive the kinds of supports they need to have a high quality of life, to have good health care, and good housing, and so forth. There is also a challenge with provider capacity around the state, and part of this is due to our current governmental policy around employment for people with disabilities. Again, despite all good intentions, the incentives simply don't exist still in Arizona for providers to move people from sheltered workshops or from other forms of limiting employment into competitive integrated employment in the broader community. Providers are incentivized still to, financially incentivized, I should say, to keep individuals within their programs rather than moving them out into programs that don't directly benefit the providers. So more work needs to be done on that. The rate structures need to be changed. Providers need to be, we can say this about every aspect of provider work, providers need better rates. They need to be reimbursed at a more appropriate level for the work they do to assist people with disabilities. That's just sort of a given across the board. And yet again this year, the legislature did not provide a rate increase for service providers in Arizona. So they are having to make do, they're having to do more with less in the face of inflation, in the face of rising costs, in the face of rising wage demands. And when I say rising wage demands, I mean, it's just a fact that individuals who work for providers deserve more than they get. So in every respect, we need to do a better job of funding the disability service system, both for employment, but also for day services and a whole variety of other things. They deserve more than they are getting in order to do the work they are doing on behalf of people with disabilities. And one of the areas that often gets overlooked, especially among those of us who live in urban areas, is the tremendous challenge with transportation, even in areas like Phoenix or Tucson. Individuals with disabilities have an almost unfathomably difficult time getting public transportation and often private transportation in order to get from their place of residence to their workplace if they have employment. And that can actually prevent them from getting employment in the first place. When you think about Arizona, I mean, we all understand that about 80% of the state's population, maybe more, lives in the Phoenix and Tucson metropolitan areas. We have vast areas that are rural, that are isolated, that do not have public transportation systems, do not have money to provide public transportation, or even provide subsidized transportation for individuals with disabilities. There is so much work that still needs to be done in order to make sure that people, if they get a job, can get to that job. So we are doing some work in the transportation space, but it is a mammoth effort, and there is so much to do in so many different areas. It's simply going to take a lot of time in order for us to address all of those issues. On the flip side, there are some great opportunities in front of us. And this is where I can't emphasize enough the importance of us working together, of us speaking with one voice on the issue of employment policy and employment opportunity for people with disabilities. We know that we represent a lot of different constituencies, a lot of different agencies, different parts of the state, different audiences, different demographics. But despite whatever differences we have, and we're not going to agree on everything, we have to be able to come to some common understanding about what it's going to take and how we together can move the needle on employment opportunity for people with disabilities. We need to improve our collaboration with one another. And whether this is through roundtables, through webinars like this, through conferences, whatever it may take for us to come together and push forward better policy proposals, better policy recommendations, we need to be willing to do that. Again, we're not going to agree on everything, but we all are on this call today because we are committed to ensuring employment opportunity. And that means that we are starting from a good place. We are starting from a place of understanding. It's just now, how do we develop the kinds of policy recommendations that will actually have impact in our state? We also need to be educating employers more. And this can be mom and pop businesses. This could be medium-sized businesses, it can be large corporations. At every level, in every type of employment situation, we need to be educating employers about why they benefit and why their communities benefit from hiring individuals with disabilities. And we can do this, again, through different venues. We can do this through conferences and so forth, or we can just do this with one-on-one conversations. If you represent a service provider that does employment work, you are probably already reaching out to employers in your community to try and develop new employment opportunities. If you're a VR job coach, you are reaching out to employers, trying to find good opportunities for the people you serve. We need to do this in formal and informal ways, and in every opportunity we get to speak to people about why employment for people with disabilities is so important, but also so beneficial. Education and training. I talked about the fact that we need to really promote beginning transition planning at an earlier age, but we also need to make sure that the kinds of education we're providing to students with disabilities is the education that's going, the education and training is what's going to be beneficial to them as they go out to seek jobs. One of the things that was pointed out to us a couple of years ago, we work with, the council works with a consultant who has a long history of work with in the education environment, has been an education advisor to several governors, and serves on the State Board of Education. And one of the things that she pointed out to us is that too often we as the disability community say to employers, you need to hire more people with disabilities. And what the employers want to say back to us, but maybe haven't for fear of offending us, is you need to provide us people who are better qualified and better trained from the outset, who understand the work that's going to be asked of them and who understand what it's going to take to perform that work at the highest level. So we know that there are a tremendous number, again, thousands and thousands of individuals with disabilities who want to work. But if we're sending them out there on job interviews, if we're sending them out there to seek employment without the appropriate qualifications, we can't expect employers to suddenly leap at the opportunity to employ them. We have to find some common ground. We have to find a way to make individuals with disabilities better qualified, not necessarily ultimately qualified, but better qualified from the outset. We need to provide them better training. We need to understand what those jobs are going to require and then impart that knowledge to the people that we are serving in the disability community. We also need to be raising the public's awareness of why disability employment matters. There's been very little done. There are sporadic efforts, but really collectively, there's been very little done to talk about disability employment, to talk about the advantages of disability employment for the general public. And this is going beyond just employers. This is for communities around the state. We need to build allies within those communities, among the general population, people who will advocate alongside us, whether they are formally employed by our agencies, whether they are even caregivers or relatives of people with disabilities. We can build allies among our communities if we raise the awareness, if we raise their level of knowledge and understanding about this issue. We also just need to be a stronger advocacy network. And this needs to include we as organizations, but also self-advocates. One of the key elements of what we do at the DD Council is self-advocacy work, helping individuals with disabilities understand how to speak for themselves effectively. We need to incorporate more self-advocates in the work we're doing, especially individuals who have been employed or individuals who have trained for employment but have faced challenges finding that employment. We need their voices to be heard, and their voices need to be heard not only in our communities, but at our legislature. I cannot emphasize that too strongly. Individuals with disabilities, self-advocates, need to have their voices heard in the halls of the legislature, in the committee hearing rooms, among the elected officials who make policy that in many cases affects their quality of life. And then we need to do a really effective job of tracking how employment is benefiting people with disabilities, both the good and maybe the not so good. How has it improved their quality of life? How has it improved their self-esteem? How has it improved their ability to be integrated into their communities? But also, where have they met challenges? And how have those challenges been addressed? Data, personal stories matter perhaps more than anything, but data has to be available in order to back up the personal, the lived experiences of people who are out there seeking employment. So we need to do a really good job of tracking data. And there are many ways of tracking data. There are many agencies that are already doing this. But what we have not, as an overall disability community, what we've not been effective at doing so far is putting all that data together into a story, into a cohesive whole that actually can affect the way policymakers act. So when it comes to working together, being part of this collaborative around the state, as I mentioned just a moment ago, we need to make sure that self-advocates are part of the discussion. They need to have their voices heard. They need to, their perspectives need to be understood, their desires, their dreams, and the challenges they face. We need to make sure that we are involving tribal communities from around the state in these discussions too. Simply because there are tribal VR entities, it doesn't give us license to say, okay, they're doing great on their own. They've got their own thing going. We're just gonna leave them to the side. We all need to be part of this conversation. We all need to be part of the conversation. We also need to make sure that the changes are made in public policy, whether it's a legislative level or at the agency level, to make sure that agencies are working together, that they are enacting the kind of policies that are going to push for competitive integrated employment, that are going to give people more opportunities, that are going to give service providers greater incentive to move people into integrated employment rather than keeping them within their own organizations, their own sheltered workshops, their own internal employment programs. Right now, There is not a good, strong understanding of how policies interact with one another. Too often there are unintended consequences when new policies, again, I say this all the time, best of intentions, new policies are enacted, but there isn't always a clear understanding of how those policies are going to affect other policies that are already in place, or how those policies are going to affect people in their real lives. So we need to do a better job of understanding how policies align with one another and where policies conflict with one another. And then once again, making sure that every voice is heard, that all stakeholders, governmental, non-governmental, individual, employer, provider, advocate, all voices are heard, all voices are at the table. We're not under any illusion that change is going to happen overnight. I've been with the DD Council for about 3.5 years. I was with the ARC of Arizona for 9 years before that. As Gina mentioned, I've been around a while. I haven't been around as long as many of you have, but I've been around a while, and I can remember back in 2013, 2014, some early conversations around this topic taking place, conversations around employment first, around moving away from sub-minimum wage employment and sheltered workshops and moving into competitive employment. It's been a little over a decade, and some progress has been made, not as much as we would like, but it is evolutionary. We have to recognize that, but we also have to push for the wisest policy, the wisest actions to be taken at the earliest possible opportunity. And then, back to the issue of data, we need to be sharing data with one another, anecdotal as well as empirical. We need to be sharing stories, and we need to be sharing facts and figures. All of that helps build the story. It helps build momentum. It helps build a stronger case for better and more employment-related policies serving people with disabilities. So within our individual organizations and within our collaboratives and within our state agencies and our provider agency or provider associations and so forth, we need to be building a better collection of data that supports the need for better policy and supports the value of disability employment. And then that information needs to be shared out with the public. I mentioned that we need to build greater public awareness. We can only build public awareness if we are sharing information with the public about what's going on and how people with disabilities are benefiting from employment opportunities, and then in turn, how their communities as a whole and the state as a whole are benefiting from those employment opportunities. When it comes to employer engagement, as I mentioned earlier, we need to be active in formal and informal ways. The state of Arizona needs to be a model employer when it comes to individuals with disabilities. There are quite a few people with disabilities employed by the state of Arizona. And in many ways, the state is doing a lot under the current administration to improve opportunities. The governor's office has established a workforce cabinet with a subgroup focused exclusively on people with disabilities. That's a great step forward. There are many other things that can be done. One of the things, and just as a little side note, one of the things that we encountered not long ago was a member of our team, Jason Sneed, I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this, Jason is a wheelchair user. Jason is in great demand when it comes to making public presentations and talking about his lived experience, but also his professional expertise around the kinds of things our organization does. But we learned about a year ago that the state did not even have a wheelchair accessible van that could be used for transportation to get Jason to different events, or to get anybody with mobility needs and wheelchair users to different places where they might need to travel for their work. So we set in motion, I should say Jason set in motion, a request to get the Department of Economic Security to secure a wheelchair accessible van so that he could actually go out and represent the council at these various events. Fortunately, we were successful with that. He worked tirelessly to bring that about, but it's one way in which certain things are being overlooked. Certain necessities to be a model employer for people with disabilities are being overlooked. And we have to recognize what those are, and we have to push for improvements to be made in the same way Jason pushed for that improvement to be made. We need to educate employers about, again, the advantages of hiring people with disabilities. The tax credits that go along with hiring people with disabilities, the ways that they can minimize the cost, we all know this. One of the things that employers often cite as a reason for not hiring people with disabilities is the various accommodations they may have to make. Well, we also know, because the research show us that most accommodations required of employees cost $50 or less. They are relatively inexpensive, and in fact, there are a great many tax credits available to help employers offset the cost of making accommodations to support their employees who have disabilities. So we need to increase the awareness of those things, and we need to work with the chambers of commerce around the state to help them understand and then advocate to their members why employment for people with disabilities is so important. In 2023, we were very successful at getting the ear of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry. The president, Danny Seiden, published an op-ed in their communications related to individuals with disabilities and why employment for people with disabilities is so important. It helped to raise the level of awareness, but we need to be doing this on a more consistent basis, and we need to be doing it at the regional chambers around the state. And then, marketing. Marketing helps. Marketing can be very effective. We collectively and individually need to be developing marketing strategies, marketing resources that can help raise the understanding of businesses about disability employment. Whole variety of different things that need to be done around education and training. Many of our partners do not even understand how the system works because the system is very complex. Byzantine, you might say. It can be so confusing. Even people who've worked in the system for a lot of years do not necessarily understand all of its nuances, don't understand how different agencies should work together. We, through these forums, through various other forums, we need to be working together to raise understanding for caregivers, family members, individuals who are integral to the lives of people with disabilities. They need to understand the realities about transition planning, about the transition process in education, about employment first as a concept and what that means. We are an employment first state. Arizona, by executive order, is an employment first state. Governor Ducey passed or signed an executive order a number of years ago, putting that into place. But what does that mean? What does that mean for individuals? And then how do you make sure that benefits are not lost when employment is taken on by the individual with a disability? Then, of course, again, for employers, for employment support professionals, what are going to be the best ways to ensure people have what they need, that they're going to be the best prepared for the opportunities they seek, and that they're going to be able to maintain their employment once they secure it. Just because a person gets a job doesn't mean the need for supports goes away. We all understand that. So how do we ensure that they receive the supports they need, the accommodations they need for whatever period of time it takes until they are prepared to no longer require those things? Messaging, I cannot overstate the importance of messaging. I know I've kind of beaten this into the ground already, but we need our communities, we need our partners, we need state and private agencies to understand what employment first is. What is the goal of employment first? Well, it is to look at employment as the first and preferred outcome for individuals as they leave the K-12 education system. It may not be a reality for all people, but it is what we should, for people who don't have disabilities, it is generally what is expected of them. So what is the expectation we should have for people with disabilities? How do we make it possible for them? And then we need to be communicating with each other consistently. We need to be speaking with one voice to our policymakers. We need to be on the same page, and that's going to require a lot more education for all of us. But that's okay. We're in it for the long haul, and we can make an impact if we continue to work together. Yeah. And then in terms of advocacy, we need, one of the things that we do at the council is look for various ways, look for an array of different advocacy opportunities. Elected officials are not the only ones who make policy in our state. They may be the only ones who pass laws and get those laws signed into law, or get the legislation signed into law. But they are not the only ones who put policy into place, because once a bill is signed, there's a whole process of putting policy and rules and implementation processes into place, and we can have an impact We can be part of public comment periods. We can be reaching out to our legislators even before bills are introduced to talk to them about why certain programs matter. Even organizations like mine that are prevented from doing lobbying, we can still do education. We can talk about issues. Why is employment for people with disabilities important? Not necessarily why should this bill pass, but what are the different aspects of this issue that need to be taken into account, and why do we need to be moving public policy in the direction of greater opportunity and greater equity? We don't use the media as effectively as we should. Now, there's a misconception that the media can be the solution to all of our problems and could be the ultimate source of information for people around the state. That isn't true. And we know that the media landscape is changing. People are using different forms of media, but that in itself provides us great new opportunities, whether it's social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever the case, or traditional media such as radio stations and television stations and newspapers. We have so much opportunity to build relationships and to amplify our messages through the media. We're not taking advantage of these as well as we should. We do see lots of one-off stories about, about coffee shops that are employing people with disabilities, or about, various ways in which people with disabilities are getting employment, but it's not consistent, and it's not as widespread as it needs to be. So these are opportunities that we need to be taking advantage of. Individual organizations can be promoting messages through social media, through their media contacts. Collectively, our associations can be promoting messages as well. I mentioned getting to policymakers before bills are introduced. Again, cannot overstate the importance of this. A lot of our elected officials will introduce legislation without really having done their homework. I know this is going to be a surprise to a lot of you. A great many people want to be champions for people with disabilities, or want to be champions for different causes, and so they will draft legislation and then they will introduce that, but they won't have talked to the people who really know the issues, the stakeholders, the people whose lives are affected by that legislation. So we need to be reaching out to our legislators as soon as we recognize there is an issue and begin the conversation with them. Remember, we have a citizen legislature in Arizona. We have people who are in Phoenix for the legislative session for a portion of the year, but then when they go home, they do their regular jobs. They are not necessarily experts on disability policy or on disability issues. We have an opportunity and an obligation to educate them on the realities of being a person with a disability or serving individuals with disabilities. And then we finally need to be coming together more. We need to be collectivizing our voice, both in terms of interaction with our policymakers, but in terms also of interaction with our communities and the media and the various different audiences that we reach out to. So there's a lot more that we can be doing, and we need to be doing it together. In the end, what's it all going to do? How will we know if we've succeeded? Well, I think some of the markers are obvious. If disability employment rates go up, we're going to know we've had some effect. That's what we're all shooting for, right? More people with disabilities securing jobs. But we want them to be the jobs they want. And we don't want them to just be pigeonholed into the kinds of jobs that people with disabilities have too often been given in the past. So we want them to have greater opportunity, greater breadth of opportunity than they have historically been given. We also want them to be receiving competitive wages along with benefits. We want them to have the opportunity to stay in their jobs over the course of time. We want these jobs to mean something to them. We want them to be jobs they want to have. And we want to build a network of employers who are not only willing and eager to hire people with disabilities, but who then will be spokespeople for the disability employment movement, who will see the light and become such evangelists for this effort that they then become the influencers among their peers around the state of Arizona. And finally, and my apologies to anybody who who may have a vested interest in sub-minimum wage. On behalf of the council, we would like to see sub-minimum wage employment go away. We do not want people we do not want the loss of opportunity for people with significant disabilities who believe they don't have an opportunity to receive competitive employment opportunities. We don't want to see them lose the opportunity to do something that's meaningful to them. But we also don't believe that individuals with disabilities deserve less. They deserve a competitive wage in a competitive and integrated setting, employment setting. So we would like to see, and this is the stance of our national organization, the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities, that sub-minimum wage needs to no longer exist. It's a relic of a former age. There are better ways to ensure employment opportunity for every person with a disability who seeks to be employed. We do not have to pay them less. We can find better solutions. And ultimately, the only way we're going to know if we've succeeded on these various fronts is if we keep record of it, if we keep statistics, if we show progress over time, and if we incorporate the stories people tell about their employment journeys, if we incorporate their actual experiences into the conversation. Again, could be good experiences, could be less than good experiences, but they all help us to improve the way we approach this topic. So we need to be doing more on all of these fronts, and we need to be doing more to capture the information that comes out of this process and comes out of the efforts that we are all engaged in. What can you do to help? I've probably mentioned all of these things already. First of all, have an employment first philosophy. Understand what employment first means, and then share that message with your employers, your colleagues, your communities. Stay attuned to what's going on at the state and local level. If you're not a member of a provider association, or you're not a member of some other professional association, you can still contact us. We at the council provide a lot of information on what's going on around the state. During the legislative session, we provide legislative updates. During other parts of the year, we have a newsletter, we have other blasts that go out. There are a lot of resources. You can certainly contact Gina Griffiths. You can contact the folks, Jessica Winchester, all of these folks who are spearheading our employment first efforts and a lot of other employment efforts around the state. They are incredible sources of information about what's happening. Stay informed. Share your stories. Share your stories with the media. Share your stories with the families you serve. Share your stories with those in your communities. Help build awareness. Help build momentum. Be part of the solution when it comes to training, ensuring that individuals with disabilities receive the kind of education they need, the transition planning they need, and then, if necessary, the post-secondary training that's going to be required for them to be employable and to keep their employment over the long term. I'm probably reiterating things that I've already said here as well, but get involved. There are all kinds of opportunities with communities of practice on transition. There's a community of practice on transition in every county or every region of the state. They are open to anyone who wishes to be involved. They are great opportunities to share your stories, but also great opportunities to learn from professionals who are working both at government agencies and at local education organizations and as advocates in the community and as caregivers. They're very diverse organizations and great opportunities to learn. The DD Planning Council, we have various committees. We are engaged in various projects, either through funding that we provide or through staff-led projects. Contact Mike, contact Jason, let them know you'd like to be involved. We would love to have you engaged with us. And then opportunities like this, webinars, to learn more about Employment First, to learn more about employment opportunities and how these can be made available and more equitable for the disability community. The biggest thing, I guess I would say, in wrapping it up, is learn more and share more. Learn as much as you can about the opportunities for individuals with disabilities to be employed, the ways in which they can be employed and made employable, and the ways they can be educated and trained to be employable, and then how to actually land them in jobs. Talk to your communities about the importance of employment for people with disabilities. Talk to your communities about the ways the community can benefit and grow and become more inclusive, how every member of society can be embraced by the community. And employment is one of the ways that can happen. Don't be afraid to speak out. And if you have trouble speaking out, orally, do it in writing. Send an email or a text to your legislator. Send emails to the various state agencies that serve people with disabilities. Don't be afraid to have your voice heard. The government exists to serve us. Our voices should be incorporated into the actions the government takes. With that, I am happy to answer any questions. I guess I apologize a little bit. I know I've gone over time, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Gina?
You are fantastic, Jon. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Did anyone want to sneak in any questions? So many, like very few people left, even though we went over time. So you get the love. That was amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you all do what Jon said. He gave us a lot of good practical tips. You can reach out to us if you think of questions later. But I also want to invite you all to join us next month. October 20th will be a week later for Employment First Topics and Tactics. And as Jon focused so much on employer engagement, that will be our topic. We will have a wonderful service provider facilitating an employer panel in celebration of National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And I hope you all have a great week. Thank you for being with us. Take one thing Jon said and do it this week.